Okay, good evening everyone. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to the Sitting County of Swansea Council meeting for October. First item on our agenda this evening is apologies for absence. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have apologies from Councillors Mike Day, Jeff Jones, Mary Jones, Elliot King, Wendy Lewis and Gloria Tanner.
Are there any others? No, can't see any hands.
Who?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Mandy. Councillor Paulette Smith, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. You've had the usual email from the monitoring officer. Ms. Meredith, anything further?
Thank you, Presiding Member. There was nothing that immediately jumped out to me as to any interest tonight. The only point I would just draw to your attention is that in relation to agenda item 8, which is the annual report of the Director of Social Services, I don't think you need to declare an interest if either yourself or a close person or associate or family member is actually in receipt of any social services care. This is a high-level, very generic report that is required under legislation.
Okay, does anyone else feel they need to disclose an interest? No one indicated. Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes. That's to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meetings as a correct record, pages 1 to 6. And these are the minutes of the 2nd of September 2021, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, you happy with it?
Yeah, move, Presiding Member.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, item 4, written responses to questions asked at the last ordinary meeting of Council, and they're on pages 7 and 8, and they are for information. Okay, agree with that. And item 5 is my announcements. Okay, at the last council meeting, you will recall I made reference to 2 awards that the council had been shortlisted for, the Welsh Housing Awards 2021. I'm pleased to announce this evening that the Welsh Housing Awards recognise and celebrate the creativity, passion and innovation of housing organisations and individuals across the sector in Wales. And therefore I'm delighted to announce the Swansea Council won in 2 categories in the Welsh Housing Awards 2021. They won in the category for partnership working, and that was for the T. Tom Jones scheme on Alexander Road. And the other was the Innovation in Housing category, and that's the Council's partnership with the Welsh School of Architecture. So congratulations to the Housing Department on those well-earned awards. Also, Matt's House Swansea also won an award, and that was in the Supporting Communities category, the Swansea Together Food Project. So again, I think we're all aware that Matt's House does an amazing service, and it's quite fitting really that they've had that award presented to them. I'd also like to make reference to the Community Green Flag Award, which has been won by the Friends of Mail, Washing Lake and Community Garden, and they've been awarded this for the 3rd year running. So congratulations to all involved, doing a sterling job on the hill there in Mail. I would like to make a correction or amendment to the Council Constitution minute, which is item 10. Okay, and in the recommendation, please delete reference to paragraph 1.6 and replace with paragraph 3. Okay, so you delete 1.6 and insert paragraph 3. Okay, that concludes my announcements. Item 6 is leaders' announcements, and I call upon Councillor Rob Stewart. Rob?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Very few announcements tonight, but just a couple of important ones. Just to make members aware, we will shortly be bringing some information before Council in terms of our ambition to declare Swansea a human rights city on International Human Rights Day later this year. That will make us the first human rights city in Wales and one of very few worldwide in that network. It will be backed up then by a year of action where we will demonstrate the actions that we will take to make sure that Swansea remains one of the best places to live for people from wherever you come from in the world. So more news on that in due course. As I mentioned to Council at our last meeting, we were in the process of appointing our new development partner. Urban Splash are now announced as that partner and provide an excellent opportunity for us to take the next phase of developments forward in Swansea. That comes to some £750 million worth of potential investment available to Swansea as we deliver the next phase of sites, including the Civic Centre site. Just on the existing progress, obviously, members may have seen press recently of us testing the skin of our fantastic new arena. That testing has progressed and is progressing well, and we're on track to complete the build of the arena in the next few weeks. And then ATG will then begin their fit out in terms of what they need to do before the first shows take place early next year, and members will know that shows are already being advertised, and we're seeing a very, very significant demand for those shows in Swansea. And then finally, just in terms of our efforts on business recovery as part of the overall recovery fund, my thanks to members who have submitted requests to the recovery fund, and those are being considered by cabinet members and the panel at present, and we intend to make some further announcements on those in due course. But just to say, the demand from local businesses in Swansea has been significant, and my thanks to members who have been in contact with their local businesses around the grants that are available of up to £10,000. And just to report to Council that we've had over 500 bids in from businesses across Swansea at present, which just shows the demand that's out there. And again, my thanks to Councillor Francis Davis, Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Stevens, who have been busy looking at those bids. And of course, Paul Relf and the team there who are working to make sure that scheme produces the help as quickly as possible to our businesses. So those are my announcements for this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks very much. Okay, public questions is item 7. I remind you that we set aside a 10-minute period, and questions must relate to items on the agenda. Now we've got 3 written questions, and we've got a Mr. Notridge Parrott with us to ask those questions. So Notridge, welcome. Fire away. You're deleted.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, no problem. Well, I think I give you prior sight of the questions. I won't read all the black bits in the preambles and the background, but in essence, it's about the item 9, I think, on your agenda, which refers to the review of revenue reserves for the authority. So if I just go through them in turn, question 1 is, this is question 1, what actual work has been undertaken by you, the audited entity, the City and County of Swansea, to incorporate climate change impacts and risks in the determination of reserve provisioning in the CCS account, the City and County of Swansea accounts, and say what position in the corporate risk register does climate change, or do climate change effects occupy? Now, there's various strictures on how the accounts are presented. I regularly, entertain myself regarding how you present your accounts and the various strictures on it. The SIPFA strictures are applicable to the local authority, as are the various LAP bulletins which you produced as part of this agenda item. So it'd be interesting to see how you respond to that one. Question 2 is, would the Section 151 officer, who is the person in charge of the finances, of how these accounting technicalities, there was a real reference by Jason Garcia of Audit Wales, who picked up regarding the representation of that. It's to refer to as technicalities within the CCS accounts, and how in the statement of the Section 151 officer, how are they prevented from affecting the taxpayer? And then further state, as a corporate entity, i.e. the CCS, this accountancy practice either assists or detracts from the UN aims of UN mainstreaming document. The UN is very concerned, as you probably come across, the Bank of England chair, Matthew Mark Carney, is the mainstreaming global finance in a response to the global crisis and the global problems that the whole world has experienced, not just pandemics. And I'd like a response to that one, which is question 2. Final one is question 3. If I get to it, it's got a little bit of a preamble to that as well. So I'm presuming everybody's had access to that. In the run into this question, the finance director should report the factors that influenced his or her judgment and ensure that the advice given is recorded formally. Where the finance director's advice is not accepted, this should be recorded formally in the minutes of the council meeting. Question 3 is as follows. Would the City and County of Swansea, the audited entity, display in its entirety the judgment and advice from the Section 151 officer, with detailing what specific attention was given to the consideration of climate change impacts and or financial market volatility, financial market manipulation, and the effects of the successor to LIBOR. LIBOR is the famous London interbank offer rate, which caused all the problems. It was manipulated. Criminal sanctions have accrued as a consequence of that, but it will be changed to the name SONIA, which is the standard overnight rate, on local authority, risk appetite, and liquidity. As I say, I give you prior notice of the question, so I'd be interested in your responses.
Thank you, Dr. Rich. Okay, call on the Section 151 officer, Mr. Ben, please.
Thank you, presiding member, and I thank Mr. Perrott for advance sight of the questions. That is much appreciated. As he has alluded to, he is a keen reviewer and commentator and questioner on the statement of accounts and has questioned a number of matters previously, and I would equally acknowledge his skillful weaving in of similar questions to the matter on the agenda today. Some of them I can answer directly in relation to reserves. Some of them I may not be able to directly answer as they're a bit bleak compared to the reserves report in front of you, but I would equally assure Mr. Perrott that there are items coming to both the next council and the next cabinet, especially cabinet on climate change, and it may be wholly appropriate for him to look out for that one and ask questions of the relevant officers on those bits around, especially the climate change aspects. In terms of the questions themselves, the first one in terms of what specific consideration do I give to climate change per se, there's a short and a long answer with this one. The short answer is it's difficult to provide for reserves for climate change because it's a long-term obligation, a long-term commitment, and to some extent we will fund those obligations and commitments made by the UK and Welsh government in future local government finance settlements and in future budgets. That's sort of the preventative work addressing the real recognised issues around climate change and the other matters that Mr. Perrott raised. However, one other aspect of the climate change emergency is that there are manifested events that already occur. The most obvious one, as he's alluded to in his questioning, is flooding. And so I would draw members' attention to report item number 9, which indicates we carry a £10 million balance sheet contingency and £3 million in annual contingency. And responding to those sorts of events can be addressed by use of that contingency sum. It doesn't need to be any bigger because if there are emergencies that occur, we are able as a local authority to utilise what's known as the Emergency Financial Assistance Scheme. For this council, it would be anything over about £1 million, which enables us to seek further funding recompense from the Welsh Government. And whilst we've not breached that threshold in recent years, some other authorities have done so in terms of very significant flooding and been able to access monies for that. In terms of more practical deliberation, the first question relates to usable earmarked reserves. And if I set monies aside for usable earmarked reserves, they're not available for other purposes. And I see the climate change agenda as one of obligation to well-being of future generations, not simply to provide for sums today, which would potentially have a detrimental impact on council taxpayers. So the answer is very much that ongoing contributions and actions will be taken forward in the budget and the medium-term financial plan. And as I say, I would urge Mr. Perrott to look out particularly for the climate change update due to come to the next cabinet agenda, because I think he'll be better placed to be able to ask specific questions relating to climate change themselves. The second question was around assurance around, and sorry, on the risk register. I think that one could also be better addressed, Mr. Perrott, in due course, because it's not directly related to the reserves. My apologies for not answering the second part of the first question. The second question was around the item we had great debate on last time around those unusable reserves. I won't overly repeat the position in terms of the debate we had, but these are non-cash, non-items that effectively are, to some extent, an accounting construct and an accounting conceit, Mr. Perrott, which are designed to protect taxpayers. So there's no cash behind them. They are unusual transactions, to say the least, and have no direct impact on the taxpayer because they're not allowed to have any direct impacts on the taxpayer as a result of legislative provision. So in terms of this answer to your second part of the question, they definitively neither add nor subtract from those UN objectives because there's nothing tangibly real to them, as it were. And by way of explanation, and also linking back to the first question, because they're not cash and so therefore they do not impact upon the taxpayer, it is slightly easier to be able to reflect some of the items under the accounting code of practice. The most obvious one is the negative pension reserve. The pension fund does fantastically well in terms of its returns, but also has to measure its future liabilities. And both of those are capable of being measured in cash and are done so and are measured in terms of an amount that would be theoretically due to be paid today if all obligations were settled today. But because it's one of those non-statutory reserves and is ring-fenced in what I referred to as the molten lava in outer space previously, and therefore cannot impact upon taxpayers, it almost kind of doesn't matter. That provision doesn't apply to any other specific cash-backed earmarked reserves. And so if one was to attempt to quantify the future costs of climate change in simply monetary terms, it would otherwise potentially have an impact on taxpayers and would probably, if I'm honest, do a complete disservice to the wider agenda, which I know Mr. Perrott is passionate about and a number of other members are passionate about. You cannot just capture it simply in monetary terms. But I can give him the absolute assurance it has absolutely no impact on taxpayers because it's an accounting construct and has no detriment or impact whatsoever on those UN climate goals and other aspirations. In similar vein, on the third question, I would refer my answer on climate change in itself. The second part Mr. Perrott has raised previously around, as well, which are around those regulatory matters around two technical rates called LIBOR and SONIA, as he has referred to. In terms of current borrowing for the authority, I only do plain, boring, vanilla use of Public Works Loan Board loans, which are pegged to effectively a margin on top of UK gilts and are not themselves directly manipulated by those allegations and findings by regulators elsewhere. So I feel I need no need to provide for specific reserves in relation to those matters. In terms of more general matters, which Mr. Perrott referred to in the preamble to question 3, he is quite right. SIPFA has pronounced it is my obligation to give you advice on what to do around liquidity and preparing for the uncertainties that lie ahead. And when we do come on to the main item, you will see that substantial sums, over £50 million, was added to reserves as a whole for the last year. And that does to some extent reflect my risk appetite around the uncertainty of matters. And does also indicate that because those are cash-backed reserves, that when you approved the statement of accounts last month, there were very substantial cash liquid balances held by the authority. So I think that answers some of the questions that Mr. Perrott was referring to in terms of my appetite for holding cash and my appetite for bolstering reserves, very much in line with the pronouncement SIPFA has given. As I say, we'll be reporting on the item itself later on this agenda, and in the very next council, you will also have my update on the assessment of the outlook for the finances for the public sector in terms of my midterm review, and also my statutory report on Treasury management activity for the year, which again I'd urge Mr. Perrott to look out for, because there will be references in there to the amount of cash we're holding, the liquidity and the borrowing strategy we've done. So I hope that gives Mr. Perrott answers in relation to the reserves items themselves. I thank him very much again for advance sight of the questions. I know he passionately is interested in these matters, and I think he'll have many more opportunities to ask the same sorts of questions in a wider context around specifically matters on climate change and associated matters, which, as I say, will be coming to the next Cabinet and next Council. Thank you, Presiding Member, for letting me answer the questions for Mr. Perrott, and I'll hand back to you to see if there's anything else that Mr. Perrott or others want to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. That's, I don't know whether both of you rehearsed that, but you took up the whole of the 10 minutes, virtually to the second. Well done. Okay, item 8 on the agenda is the annual report 2020-21 of the Director of Social Services. I understand we've got Mr. Dave Howes with us. Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Presiding Member. Having demonstrated that I'm dressed appropriately for council, I'm going to turn off my camera just because I have some Wi-Fi challenges, and then I'll say a few words. Thank you. So this evening, Council will be considering my annual report for the year 2020-21. In February 2020, I was looking forward to the coming year. Council's long-term strategy is to shift our approach away from traditional models of care and support to ones that emphasise prevention, promote well-being, are strengths-based, support resilient communities, are enabling and re-abling, invest in early help, better mitigate the impact of poverty, facilitate better partnership and more integrated working, were all starting to bear fruit. I wasn't anticipating the worst global health pandemic in living memory and the devastating impact this would have for our population, individuals, families, carers and communities, and our workforce, both council and across the wider health and care sector, including third and independent sector colleagues and volunteers. The year necessarily became all about mitigating the dreadful impacts of this terrible disease. And as a consequence, we had to implement very different approaches to service delivery almost overnight, and then keep adjusting our approach as circumstances changed and new and additional challenges emerged. Traditional day services closed and staff were redirected to support individuals as best we could in their own homes. We opened additional emergency care home beds, utilising staff who hadn't previously worked in those settings. We expanded and refocused our local area coordinators on the organisation of community and volunteer supports to the most vulnerable living through lockdowns. We reorganised social work teams to focus on dealing with the most urgent requests for support that were literally often life and death interventions. Our domiciliary care teams were reconfigured to further enhance both hospital avoidance and hospital discharge arrangements. And colleagues from across the council joined in with our community support service arrangements to support the most vulnerable, and others supported implementation of infection control measures in all our care home settings, alongside procurement, management and distribution of personal protective equipment across the sector. Children's Services, working closely with education and schools and other partners, put in place emergency safeguarding arrangements to ensure the most vulnerable children continue to be supported to remain safe. Domestic abuse and tackling poverty services were reorganised and expanded. Our commissioning teams were reconfigured to provide emergency support, advice and financial assistance to independent care providers. Our finance and grants teams managed the receipt, distribution and monitoring of an additional £20 million worth of financial assistance to keep healthcare and third sector organisations running across Swansea. Business support colleagues stepped in to take on duties that released frontline staff or themselves volunteered for frontline practice. The heads of service and their senior management teams worked tirelessly to remain solution focused and inspire confidence while tackling the impossible challenges with which they were faced. Our workforce in the council, alongside our statutory partners, third and independent sector colleagues, countless volunteers and unpaid carers, have been magnificent in their resilience, flexibility, commitment and downright humanity to keep meeting impossible asks. In the light of all of the above, it's extraordinary that the performance of our services has stood up so well. However, there have clearly been limitations on our ability to provide the care and support our population expects. Individuals haven't been able to access the level and type of care they will have received in the past. Carers and families have had to step in and have done so for an extended period. They are as exhausted as our workforce. Our ability to meet usual timescales has been impacted, and backlogs in different areas of service have grown in the same way as they have in the health service. During the first two waves, and despite the extraordinary efforts of staff in care homes across the region, the pandemic had a terrible impact in those settings. The impacts of the pandemic remain severe across health and care services, and in many ways things are more difficult now than at any stage during the pandemic. Workforce shortages across health and care, both sickness absence, staff needing to isolate, and severe challenges with recruitment and retention are significantly hampering our ability to keep all services running, to catch up on backlogs, and to meet current new demand. These difficulties are likely to be compounded over the winter, and therefore currently we are continuing to run health and care across the region on an emergency planning basis. Thankfully, the partnership arrangements in our region are particularly strong, and I remain confident that we will grapple with and find shared solutions to the anticipated extreme challenges of the coming winter and remain focused on doing what matters for our population. I'm extremely grateful for the support that colleagues from across the council have provided over the past 18 months. Those asked for support are likely to continue for a while yet. Likewise, the support, advice and assistance of CMT and Cabinet colleagues has been essential. I'd also like to thank Scrutiny and PDC chairs for supporting adjustments to their work programmes to reflect the priorities of managing the crisis. I'm pretty sure that, like me, the responsible Cabinet members weren't expecting 21-22 to be quite the year it was. I think Councillor Lloyd summed it up when he half-jokingly commented that he spent more time with me than with his own family. The Cabinet members' direct engagement with the workforce throughout the year has been hugely appreciated. Looking forward, it's still going to take us some considerable time to get back to focusing on implementing our long-term strategies. The implementation of those strategies will clearly need to be amended to reflect the long-term impact of COVID and other societal changes, not least because the workforce challenges we face today will likely be with us for some time and will need Wales and UK-wide structural interventions to create a fit-for-purpose health and care system for the future. Council will need to play its part in advocating for and then delivering greater levels of investment in future models of care and support and other wellbeing services, including, dare I say it, better pay for a workforce who've most certainly earned it. In finishing, I want to emphasise once again that our heads of service and their senior management teams have done an extraordinary job at ensuring we were constantly the best that we could be over the past year, as was evidenced in CIW's recent assurance visits, the report of which I've appended to my report for last year. They should be very proud. Our workforce doubly so. They have risen to every challenge over and over again and continue to do so. I know Council recognises how lucky we are to have them working in Swansea. I'll jump back down off my soapbox, but I'm happy to pick up any specific questions from councillors on the content of the report, or indeed the current challenges across health and social care services. The recommendation before Council is to receive and approve the annual report of the Director of Social Services 2021. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you. First speaker I've got is Councillor Clive Lloyd. Clive.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, Dave. Dave, you caught me on the hop there. I was expecting you to go on for at least another 30 minutes, so I've had to get my notes right in front of me a lot sooner. But no, in all seriousness, can I start by saying thank you for your very, very kind comments, and particularly in your introduction of your report. And you're absolutely right. Nobody could predict this, and certainly when Councillor Stewart, the leader, asked me to pick up the portfolio, it was not something that I expected would evolve. None of us did, we? None of us expected to evolve as it did and to continue for so long. So, in that respect, it's a very difficult, very challenging year. I have to pay particular regard to Dave. Listen, we are absolutely blessed to have such a director of social services within our authority. Throughout my time as the cabinet member, many hours were spent not only with Dave, Amy and Helen, but with other cabinet members from across Wales, with Welsh Government cabinet members. And I can honestly say and guarantee that Dave is up there with the best of them. His leadership, his outstanding decision making has been exemplary, and we owe him a huge debt of gratitude for some of the decisions that we made. Listen, not only were we dealing with COVID, we had, as he said, some organisational changes that we needed to make to deal with this. We had a restructure of our social worker resource. We had the instigation of a rapid response team, which coming up to November, December, when things were really, really tough, proved absolutely invaluable. I know Dave was at the forefront of that idea and recommending that. And again, it saved a lot of the crisis that might have evolved throughout Swansea and the region. So, you know, and the engagement that Dave has undertaken has been second to none. So, Dave, it was difficult, it was tough at the time, but it's a period of my life I will absolutely never forget. And again, I thank you for all your guidance, your support, and your leadership throughout that time. Likewise, we couldn't have done it without Helen and Amy. Again, not only did we put these organisational things in place, but we decided to put a new heads of service restructure in place, which I think was, although it might not have been a response directly initially to COVID, worked really, really well. And I know that, again, Swansea is blessed with two outstanding heads of service in Helen St John and Amy Hawkins, who have been absolutely brilliant. But I know the three of them would not want me to focus on them. They would want me to focus on the people on the ground that were going into work day in, day out, helping people going into the care homes, doing the domiciliary care work, and keeping our most vulnerable people, our most vulnerable adults, safe as they possibly can through coronavirus. And I don't think that we could ever thank those people enough. I will never be able to convey the gratitude that the people of Swansea owe those people. And again, Dave, you know, going through November, December, January of last year, February, things were really grim. And we were hearing stories of outstanding, over and beyond the call of duty, things that people were doing. And again, you know, if you put yourselves in the positions of those people going into a period before we had the vaccines, don't forget we didn't have vaccines until January. People were going into work not knowing what they were going to be dealing with, not knowing what COVID outbreaks they were going to be dealing with, not knowing how, you know, people that they were dealing with on a day-to-day basis were actually physically going to be, whether they were going to be there even. So, you know, we can't put into words enough the debt and gratitude that our adult social services, our child and family social services have on the front line have been enduring over the last 12 months. And again, you know, as Dave says, it was always going to be a case of you can only push people so far, can't you? People need a break, people need a rest, and building that rest and break into a period over this length of time is really, really difficult. And again, I'm sure he's right that the challenges that the service is facing now are as great as they've ever been. So the other thing I would like to say is I'd like to thank our trade unions, because there was a lot of discussions and negotiations about how we will react to different things. So I'd like to thank the trade unions for their support and assistance in helping us to move some of the things that we wanted to do to respond in the manner that we wanted to, in a you know, pleasant manner and an effective manner. And of course, we do have to have backroom staff as well. And Dave, you know, there's lots of backroom staff that we needed to keep us going forward. So it's been a whole team effort. But I'll finish there. But you know, it's, you know, we were really, really blessed in Swansea, and I know Councillor Child will bear out and carry on the good work that's been undertaken, and support and help and assist everyone that he possibly can. So thank you, Dave, and thank you to Amy, thank you to Helen and the whole of the Directorate for the work that they've done and they continue to do.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Are you proposing the report? You're moving it?
Yeah, I'll move it. I'm happy to move it.
Good, thank you. Councillor Mark Child.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dave, for absolutely amazing report on an amazing year, and thank you, Clive, for being a fantastic cabinet member throughout that year. And I echo all your thoughts and praise for the workforce, for the trade unions, for the senior management right across the board. It's I was trying to think of quite how to say this, and I'm not sure anybody will be able to put in words just how they feel about the work that has been undertaken by social care staff across Swansea in the last year. Led by Dave and led by, as you mentioned, Helen St John and Amy Hawkins in acting heads in social services. And I hope another year doesn't pass where we still have them as interim posts, because they deserve being made permanent, as well as the staff who have gone out and shown their commitment, shown their bravery and compassionate, and shown how vital they are in this year. And if they really are key workers, and we really believe that they are key workers, as we have said, and as I think they have demonstrated they are, I think that they need that recognition, just not in words but in deeds. And our deeds need to be to reward them properly for the jobs they have done and will be doing in future, and thank them and praise them as well. But thanks and praise are very good and very worthwhile, but I think the reward should be more for the jobs that they do as well. And I know Dave has carried on this year despite a level of ill health as well that he's experienced, and he's led by example, and this report is something which I think possibly one of the proudest moments we have had, or the proudest reports we should have had to council is since I've been a member of council. What our staff have done this last year has been nothing short of miraculous. Thank you, David, for the report. I'm delighted if I'm able to second it.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Patterson Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Can I say, first of all, at this stage, I'm speaking also on behalf of Councillor Susan Jones, who is the convener of the Adult Social Services Scrutiny Performance Panel, as you well know. Anyway, as usual, we've had an extremely comprehensive report from David, and also Simon has been involved as well, David, I guess. I would like to express our gratitude for the lengths they have gone to in preparing and presenting this report. Of course, the report covers a period from the start of the pandemic through the various iterations of COVID up until the end of March. This resulted in a requirement for management and officers to find different and novel ways of working, which have obviously been referred to on a number of occasions now. They've also had to look for new mechanisms and methods of ensuring that vulnerable children, young people and adults were protected and provided for as much as possible. When you look at the tables of activity and performance in the report, you realise what a fantastic job the department has done. From a scrutiny point of view, Sue and myself were prepared to suspend scrutiny during the worst periods for a period of time. However, David, you were insistent that performance monitoring as a minimum should always continue, and so that's what we did. But she and I certainly worked together with scrutiny officers and senior managers of the department to minimise officer time required to collect data and prepare and present reports. Despite all the problems generated by the pandemic, the performance reports show just how successful officers and staff have been in providing and serving the people that they look after on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, there have been services such as day services which have been practically impossible to deliver, but generally the necessary services to ensure the safeguarding of vulnerable people in Swansea have been successfully provided. From a scrutiny point of view then, we would like to express our true admiration and veneration for the social services staff and all the people involved with them in that sense through the health boards and the third service. Obviously, a lot has already been said by the two cabinet members, Councillor Child and Councillor Lloyd, which have put it more into context than I have been able to do in this period of time. But certainly we would like to express our appreciation from a scrutiny point of view for the work that has been done within the department by yourself, David, and by the staff and all the people who you've been involved with in providing this service. And we'd also be very grateful, I think, if you would take that message back to everybody on our behalf as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Paxton. Councillor Chris Holly.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Dave, this has been a year we don't really want to see again. And this report highlights the effect that, as Councillor Mark Charles has said, the our key workers, from yourself right down to the cleaners in residential homes, the domiciliary care workers and what have you. I feel that words can't say enough about the people that have been on the front line and working, and I just think that other people like Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Charles have said everything I think it is to say, and just if you'll pass on a congratulations, and I'm sure everyone in this chamber, everyone on the council accepts the fact that the work they've carried out has been more than vital. It's cared for the most vulnerable in our society, and vulnerable people who are forgotten in many cases. But during this pandemic, everybody and a lot of the councillors in this chamber also have stepped up to help as well. And I just wish to pass our thanks on to the staff and everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Rob Stewart, Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Much of what I was going to say has been said, but I intend to repeat it because it needs repeating. Look, my personal thanks, as well as the thanks obviously from my group, go out to Dave, Helen, Amy and the team and everybody in social services, because they are the key workers, as was been mentioned previously, who put themselves out there day in, day out during the pandemic. And, they do deserve a huge amount of thanks, credit and recognition for what they do. And I'm very pleased that hopefully in the next few weeks, we will see further announcements from the Welsh Government, which will deliver on that recognition that we will obviously add to as a council here in Swansea. Specifically as well, I want to recognise the efforts that Clive made during the pandemic. Clive did step into the breach and really did a fantastic job as cabinet member for adult services. And Clive, the biggest compliment I could give to you as a cabinet member for that period is that John Davis would be absolutely proud of what you did. And I don't think there's a higher accolade I can give to anybody in council than that one. Equally, I am very grateful to the work that Mark and Elliot have done, both sides of that, and they continue to do. And, again, I think the strength that we have both on the political and officer side in adults and children's services at the moment is something we should be really, really grateful for. And I am very, very proud, not just of the senior leaders, but for everybody in those services who has delivered for us. And, there is nothing like the last 18 months that we can compare it to. If David fetched this report in normal times, we would have quite rightly welcomed it. But this was a report done at a time when we've got a once-in-a-100-year pandemic, and it really was a wartime effort. That's the only real sort of term I can give to this. It's that everybody pulled together, did what was needed to be done, and people are alive and well in Swansea because of it. And thank you very much from me.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Lyndon Jones. Lyndon.
Great, thank you, presiding member. Yeah, I would like to add my thanks to Dave and his team. I certainly took a number of cases to Dave during the course of the pandemic, and both he and his and the team were absolutely excellent in the way they operated in a really professional way, getting the jobs done very, very quickly. And I say a big thank you, because some of those cases were quite difficult. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lyndon. Councillor Alison Pugh.
Thanks, presiding member. Dave, Louise is going to speak as well. I believe, although she's not very well of her. I was just wanting, to thank you, as both of us as cabinet members work closely with you. And only this week, somebody said to me out there how amazing you are and how you stand out as head and shoulders across Wales. And they said it's because you remember what it's like. You remember what it's like being out there, and they couldn't speak highly enough of you. So I thought I would pass that on. And Dave, I'm really grateful for everything that you have done, and all the staff, particularly in these last 18 months. I know within the supporting community role, I work more closely with Amy than with Helen, but I would like to thank both. And the relationship that is there between the local authority, health, and the third sector now is just fantastic. It's really developed, and everybody is feeling supported by yourselves out there. And I can say, our staff, they care about the residents of Swansea. They've gone above and beyond for people, especially to try and meet the most vulnerable, the needs of the most vulnerable people. And just to mention a few, from within the corporate parenting and all the team there, working with our vulnerable, looked after children, to our poverty team, employability, welfare rights, lifelong learning, the play team, the local area coordinators. They have all been absolutely amazing, and they don't say no. They always try to find a solution. They always try to find a way around things. So I just like to say, I'm really proud to work with everybody, and just a big thank you.
Thank you for those words, Alison. Thank you. Councillor Kerry Evans. Kerry?
Yes, yes. Thanks, Chair. I won't keep people. I want to add to what people have said. Obviously, I agree 100% to what all the previous speakers have said. But just as the chair of the People PDC, I'd like to thank Dave formally for the report, but also thank all of the officers who've supported the PDC in my time as chair there over the past couple of years. But also, what just wanted to say, it was really struck me personally, not just about how quickly the services and the staff adapted and to the changes and the challenges of COVID and the lockdown and everything else, but how quickly they've really grasped the learning from the changes that they made during that time, to really use that learning and grasp it and capture it and use that to plan for better services going forward. And we've seen that in the PDC with Amy's work on the volunteering strategy and other things through children's services as well. And it's a real testament, Dave, to yourself in your senior leadership, but also all the staff really. And there's real evidence of the culture of continuous improvement that exists in Swansea Social Services Department, and the professionalism of all your staff. So thanks for the report, and congratulations to the staff.
Thank you, Kerry. And finally, Councillor Louise Gibbon.
Thank you very much, Presiding Member. I really apologise. I'm really losing my voice today. So I'm not going to say much, but just wanted to add to what everybody else has said, really. As Alison said, in the supporting communities portfolio, we've been working very closely, particularly with the Tackling Poverty team, who have done fantastic work behind the scenes, and are more valuable than ever now, considering the cut to people's incomes that's coming, and with the cost of living crisis. And also wanted to pay tribute to the Violence Against Women staff as well, and the Domestic Abuse Hub, for the ongoing work that they're doing, and again a very topical topic at this time in the news. So I'm sorry, I'll have to stop.
You sound as if you're suffering, Louise. Yeah. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you all for those very kind words. Dave House, it's all on record, so you've got to, nobody can take it back. It's all down there. And okay, the report has been proposed and seconded. Mr. Evans, do you want to take the vote?
Okay, thank you, Presiding Member. The vote has been launched. It should be appearing on your screens instantly. I'll give you a moment or two, and then if you haven't received it, I will take a named vote for those who haven't had it. Okay, if anybody hasn't received it, do you want to raise your virtual hand, please? Councillor Gordon Walker, how do you vote? For, against, or abstain?
For.
Sorry. Mike Lewis?
For. Who?
Oh, thank you. Penny Matthews?
For.
Thank you. Fiona Gordon? Fiona Gordon?
You're muted, Fiona.
For.
For. And Councillor Christine Richards?
For. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Right, anybody else need to vote verbally? No? Okay, I'm going to close the poll, so give me a moment.
Member.
Yeah, that's fine. That's unanimous for Presiding Member.
Good, thank you very much. Thanks. Item 9 is the review of the revenue reserves. Mr. Ben Smith, Section 151 Officer, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, it falls to me to follow that last report and feel a bit embarrassed to only talk about something as meaningless as pure money compared to the impassioned and passionate debate on something much more important in terms of the frontline social care and the tributes that have been paid to colleagues. In terms of the report itself, it is my statutory report to you in terms of giving you professional advice, and it's the once a year opportunity for you to hear what I've got to say. I have to say it's both an interesting and an uninteresting report at the same time, to be honest. You have one recommendation in front of you, which is very clearly advice from me, which is steady as it goes in terms of the recommendation, that I see no need to make any material changes to the strategy at this point in time. And that's why when I've concluded my technical advice, I will hand over to the leader and others. But the recommendation is that you approve my advice in sections 3.10 and 3.11. Or not, as the case may be, given the previous discussions we've had in the public question time. It's the reason I say it's both interesting and uninteresting is because you've got to think about the context of this. Yes, the pandemic has been and is still ongoing, and this is a context of more than £50 million added to reserves at the same time as having flexed the budgets and spent more than £200 million more than the budget. So I'll just draw your attention to the main points and also reflect upon it is a very turbulent and uncertain time for everyone in the wider economy.